one of the new things I realized was when they were Kaneda and the rest of the biker gang were at the detention center, getting processed after they got arrested by the police after murdering people in a bike gang war.
Critically
When
harming, not killing.
yeah, yeah, lasting brain damage.
One, two, three, four.
Welcome to Nerd Taku Podcast, where we watch it so you don't have to. I'm your host, Eli. With me is my co-host, Ben.
Hello, listeners. Happy to be here.
This week, we have a special guest, our friend, Trevor.
Hey, how you doing?
This week, we're reviewing the 1988 action drama, Akira. Spoiler warnings ahead. Ben, my dude, are there spoilers?
When aren't there, my guy? Just when aren't there?
So true. Director, Katashiro Otomo. Main cast, Johnny Young Bosch, Wendy Lee, Jamieson Price, Joshua Seth. My people, my dudes. This film, yes, it started a chain reaction to a lot of people's interest in anime, but it was a roller coaster ride. Ben, I want to ask you first before we get into Trevor, because this was his pick. What were your initial thoughts after watching this?
Let's just say I remember why I never went back to it after the first time I saw it. It is a very interesting film.
Now, Trevor, because you picked this film, I want to know why you picked this film for us to review today.
So the main reason I wanted to pick this film, though, it's probably one of my favorite animes that I've ever seen. Now, granted, I'm not much of an anime watcher, though, but the first time I watched this, I was like, I absolutely love this show. This is, like, seriously one of my favorite things I've ever seen.
All right. So on IMDb, Akira got an 8 out of 10. And on myanimelist.net,
Pretty damn close to my anime.
yeah, it's pretty close. It's like a 8.16. And this film is 36 years old. So it's impressive it's kept like a cult following for so long. So Ben, would you kindly give us a synopsis on myanimelist.net?
Absolutely. Japan, 1988. An explosion caused by a young boy with psychic powers tears through the city of Tokyo and ignites the fuse that leads to World War III. In order to prevent any further destruction, he is captured and taken into custody, never to be heard from again. Now, in the year 2019, a restored version of the city known as Neo Tokyo, an area rife with gang violence and terrorism against the current government, stands in its place. Here, Kanade leads the Capsules, a group of misfits known for riding large custom motorcycles and being in constant conflict with their rivals, the Clowns. During one of these battles, Kanade's best friend Tatsuya is caught up in an accident with an Esper who finds himself in the streets of Tokyo after escaping confinement from a government institution. Through this encounter, Tetsuo begins to develop his own mysterious abilities as the government seeks to quarantine this latest psychic in a desperate attempt to prevent him from unleashing the destructive power that could once again bring the city to its knees.
That synopsis, I feel, really explains the film. Trevor, when you hear that synopsis, do you picture that the way you see the film?
Yes. Now, probably my favorite thing, at least during the synopsis, though, is when Tetsuo kind of, first meets the Esper, right? And he starts developing all these strange and mysterious, psychic abilities, too. I really enjoy it, though, because it kind of goes into a dive on how power can kind of just go to somebody's head, especially somebody kind of broken or as broken as Tetsuo is during the film. You kind of see how powerless he feels in a lot of different situations, especially at the beginning too. And he always feels like he has to get saved. And so when he finally gets this new dose of really strong power, he's like, oh, well, I don't need anybody else. And it just goes straight to his head. And then you just kind of watch the downfall of man happen before your eyes as his own arrogance and, his own ego gets to his own head.
Exactly. So I gave this film a 6.75 out of 10.
Yeah. I gave it a 5.
What'd you give it, Trevor?
Oh, I totally gave it a 7. I think it's a great movie. I definitely have my complaints with it though, but yeah, I think this is a fantastic movie, and I'd highly recommend anybody to watch it.
Okay, let's get into this. Let's get into the review of this. We're gonna start off with plot. I gave plot a 0.5.
I also gave plot a 0.5.
I gave plot a 0.75.
So I want to know one thing from you, Trevor. Why couldn't plot be a 1?
Now, there's definitely some things I know they have to. There's definitely some things that happen in the plot that they're like, oh, it just happened to be that these people were here. That's really convenient. But I it's just to drive the story along. And I know also in the manga, if I'm correct too, the actual story is a lot longer, and there's things that happen kind of in between. And I feel like for the movie, they maybe just how to oh look, let's just put these guys over here. Oh look, that worked out really well. Whoa, how convenient. But I think just overall the plot though, I absolutely love it though. Just kind of the story of, like what I said earlier, just watching power go to somebody's head. And there's also just kind of some themes of, nuclear war and kind of what Japan had to go through in the Second World War and the aftermath of that. The old world gets burned away, and then this new restored Japan kind of rises from the ashes of that. And I think that's really emphasized in Akira.
Why couldn't? So my question to you, Ben, why the 0.5?
This plot was in several directions. There wasn't one singular plot line until it came towards the end trying to defeat Tetsuo. There was his bike gang fighting off the clowns. Then all of a sudden this government agency comes in. There's psychic ability kids that are introduced into the story. There's just so much going on that doesn't focus on the main plot of the story. The main plot was there's an individual named Akira that had destroyed the world. Tetsuo power is just as strong, if not as strong as Akira's was, and they need to stop Tetsuo from running rampant. But before then, you have the fight with the biker gangs that had nothing to do with any of the plot. It was just side plot. Then you bring in Kaori, who was supposed to somewhat be a staple for Tetsuo, when obviously that didn't work because Tetsuo ended up absorbing her and killing her. Then there's your main Japanese government agent, Shiki Mishima, who overthrows the government because he doesn't like the way that they're running it, so he has them all killed and arrested, and there's just so much going on that doesn't focus on the main plot line of stopping Tetsuo so he doesn't create another world war, doesn't destroy Tokyo, Neo Tokyo. Stick to that line and stop focusing so much on the side. I don't understand why there was so much going on that had nothing to do with the main plot.
I'm with you, Ben, a little bit. There was so much going on that I feel like the main story was being buried alive until the end. But the main plot didn't really come out for a while. Like,
not to the last 30 minutes of the film.
Yeah, 30, maybe 40 minutes. It was like the story felt like it was not Tetsuo at all. It felt like it was more his friend, Kaneda. And then what happened was they made it him because Tetsuo felt this urge of, I'm young and all I've been told to do is follow me and listen and shut up and don't be the hero or the leader. And so he was getting tired of it and became this really sinister, basically villain almost. He became the villain. But he was just trying to overcome his own mental stage of, I want to be a leader like my friend. He always looked up to his friend and always had this problem with his friend always being the leader. He wanted to be that hero. And when you got the psychic powers, you could see it. So that kind of story of he's trying to just humanize himself and be the hero. It felt like that would have been good. But like I said, it got buried. There was so much side plot that didn't need to be there that caused it to just suffocate itself.
See, now, I do agree with your points here. I think all the additional things that add on, at least for me, I really enjoy the world building. Scenery and, world building is a big thing of why I really liked this movie the first time I watched it, along with the relationship between Canada or whatever, and Tetsuo, their relationship. Tetsuo is kind of a secondary protagonist throughout, the beginning part of the film. And then all of a sudden, he gets introduced to these new psychic abilities, and it goes straight to his head. Being under Kanada's, shadow his entire life and feeling like, oh, well, I'm nobody without him, and I'm constantly needing to be saved. I'm constantly doing things wrong. I mean, even the scene where he steals his bike and drives off to go impress, what is her name? Kaori again?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When he steals Kanada's bike to go impress her, he drives past an area he shouldn't be going by, and then all of a sudden is, intercepted by a rival biker gang and almost gets them both of them killed. And it's only due to the, very convenient timing of Kanada showing up and saving him yet again is the only reason why both of them don't get killed in that situation. And I think that even kind of goes more to, oh, well, I can't really do anything by myself, and I'm tired of, living in somebody else's shadow my entire life.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Focus on the main plot, but there wasn't. It wasn't focusing on that main plot line. It kept diverging between this government group and the military taking over and the clowns that really had, I mean, they had some part in showing why Tetsuo did what he did, but for the most part, they focused too much on the side plots that took your attention away from the main theme being Tetsuo felt helpless until he got the powers that went to his head.
Acting. I gave it a 0.75.
0.5.
Yeah, I gave it a 0.5 as well.
Why did you get... Okay, let me ask Trevor first. Because you like this film and you recommended it, why did you give acting a 0.5?
I still really like this movie though, but man, it is 1988, that's for certain. And I don't know, I feel like there's, some new things that have come out that are kind of better ways to do acting. And anyways, too, being from 1988 as well, I feel like maybe this is kind of a privileged position from my viewpoint, as probably a lot of other movies and even animes that I've seen as well have kind of taken the acting, I feel like, from this movie because it was so, so big when it first came out, and maybe kind of reused it. So maybe I'm just like, oh, well, this is stale, and just kind of feels the exact same way.
Ben, what made this acting not a 0.75?
Mainly, you could not connect with anybody that was speaking. There, even through Tetsuo's emotional states, there was nothing that could really pull you in. I just felt like it was a young cast. You really couldn't focus or what's the word I'm looking for? You couldn't bring yourself to really connect with any single character.
You couldn't get relatable?
Not at all. It wasn't terrible, it wasn't great, so I just had to fence line it. I hate saying that I have to fence line it, but in this particular movie itself, I didn't find anything spectacular. I didn't find anything terrible. It was just middle ground. Lackluster.
I will say, kind of, when you brought up the point of you couldn't really relate with anybody, I would say at least I did relate with Tetsuo and kind of just feeling helpless. I think everybody's kind of felt that before in their life. And I think at least that's maybe one way you can, empathize with the main antagonist once he, goes absolutely crazy.
So I gave it a 0.75 because I understand that 1988 anime wasn't really popping off in the United States until like probably about half a decade to almost a decade later, when you saw the anime scene becoming more of a big thing in the Western culture. So I look at this as this is the foundation to where we have anime today. And yes, it had its rough moments, and yes, it did have no relatability with some of the characters, but I see it as for the project it became, because back in the 80s, I would never expect a 2-hour film back then, because to get that much in a story, this was a complex story, like with how much they put into it. So I give the voice acting the credit that it laid the foundation for future works. But yes, it was rough. I couldn't give it the 1. Like, no, there was no way I could give it a 1. But a 0.75 to me feels like it was okay, but it was, I understand in the time frame when it came out. Because the voice acting for the dub was done a year later after the subbed. So for them, they try to take their time for it. And there are some characters in here who do not have emotion in their voice because they're young, like Ben said. This is a young cast. But I see it as a foundational work for future works for in the anime community.
Well, I'll say that 1989 dub is, ooh, baby.
I'm glad they updated it in 2001 with Pioneer. They updated the sound of it, and it sounds so much better. Let's hit character development. What'd you give it, Ben?
0.
You gave it a 0. Trevor, what'd you give it?
Oh, I totally gave it a 1. 100%.
Wow, I gave it a 0.75. Ben, I want to know why a 0.
Where's the development? Tell me. Who developed?
I think out of all characters that Kaneda was the only one who developed.
How?
You could see it when it was at the end where he realized that his friend Tetsuo was feeling alone and he never understood where his friend came from. And you could see it when he was getting like in that big white orb with Akira when he was in there, that he was understanding where his friend was, how his friend acted the way he did. And at the end, he wasn't mad at his friend. Because you could see it throughout the film. He was mad at his friend for being such an idiot. But then at the end, he realizes that...
I wouldn't say mad. I would say frustrated.
Mad and frustrated are kind of the same, in my opinion.
Not really.
Like, why do you say that?
Because if you're mad at somebody, there is a designated reason, a designated thing that you are constantly berating them for. And just there's something that just boils your top. Frustration is you're trying to attempt to improve this situation. You're just huffed about it. You're not angry, you're not over the top, you're not boiling. You're just, there's something in your gut that tightens. This is how Kaneda felt towards Tatsuo throughout the film. It was more, Kaneda was a constant. All he was the leader of this bike gang. All he wanted to do was keep all his friends safe, and that included Tetsuo. So his frustration with Tetsuo going over the top and not listening to him, not stopping, and Tetsuo trying to outgrow Kaneda was frustrating him because Kaneda didn't ever think of Tetsuo as being weak. He just wanted to make sure that his friends were safe. There's no real development in either of them, nor through Kei. All she was a character who wanted to free Akira, just like everybody else. They were part of that uprising of the government. Where is the development?
See, I can definitely understand some of your points. Well, Kaneda at the very end of the film, right? He gets the girl. He's like, oh, well, everything worked out. We saved the day. But obviously he lost his friend Tetsuo. Now, I feel like Kaneda never really thought anything, didn't like hate Tetsuo or anything. He probably just treated him like a little brother, right? He's like, oh, well, you keep making these mistakes, so I'm going to try and, be the father figure, and I say that with some air quotes, in your life, right? Kaneda's headstrong. He's not afraid to jump into things. He's very confident in his abilities and what he's able to do, right? I mean, honestly, even when he sneaks into the resistance meeting and, well, doesn't really sneak in. He goes with Kei into the resistance meeting, and they ask him who he is, and he goes, oh, well, it's probably a stretch for me to say that I'm Kei's boyfriend, but hey, maybe we could go with that. And then, proceeds to get a gun pointed at him. But Tetsuo is kind of the opposite of that. He's insecure, he's unsure of himself, he feels like he constantly makes mistakes, and I think that really kind of comes from him, never being able to really have his own place within the biker gang group, And, throughout the film, had he, just kind of accepted his place and, just kind of realized the dynamic between him and Kaneda, and realized that Kaneda didn't think of him as a waste of space and didn't really think of him as, oh, he's just my mess up little brother, and I say that again with air quotes. Had he gone in there and been like, oh, well, I just want to, I'm just happy to have a group that I finally belong in. Instead, he gets all this power and then he goes, oh, well, now I'm finally better than you, Kaneda. I'm going to take it out on the entirety of Neo Tokyo and kill everybody. I think that's the wrong way to do it. And honestly, I gave the character development a 1, primarily because they kind of set up Tetsuo's background, right? He's insecure. He feels like he's helpless and he can't really make any change in his life. He gets this massive amount of power all of a sudden and it goes straight to his head. And honestly, I think that is fantastic because anybody in that situation would do the exact same thing. It would go straight to their head and then they would go off the rails with it. And initially, he uses it for, kind of minor things. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, well, I can just do whatever I want now. People stand in my way. I'm just going to kill them. I mean, he even goes back to the bar where this whole film started and then just kills the bartender because, he's kind of mouths off to him.
Which is character regression. Where's the
I
development?
still think that's character development, though, because I think it's just a big showing of what humans would do when they're just given an unlimited source of power and it goes straight to their heads.
With progression, there's always regression in development.
I know, but to regain development, regression is strong, but to regain development, there has to be an upside to the after effect of your regression. Where was the upside?
Well, I do think Tetsuo gets redeemed in a way, though, when Akira shows up and, takes away all the bad stuff he's been doing and then envelops him in the white ball. I think that's kind of his redemption arc of, oh, well, I didn't realize I was being such an evil person. And then he finally realizes that, oh, Kaneda, I need your help as my friend. Please come help me. I'm scared of what's going to happen.
On death's door. That's
Yeah.
the sad development.
Sometimes that's the best time for redemption.
Begging for life at that point.
All right. I'll give it a 0.25 then. There really wasn't anything else.
Okay.
Okay.
Sound and music.
Sound and music. Ooh, boy.
I give it a 0.5.
I also gave it a 0.5.
I also gave it a 0.5. Hey, look, finally something all we agree on.
We all agree. Okay. In the factor that we gave it a 0.5, what is one of the reasons it got the 0.5? Why? What are one of your guys' reasons why you gave it a 0.5?
Well, me personally, I do like a lot of the music in the show. I think it's really just some of the sound effects and whatnot. I mean, it's the 80s, right? They don't have, modern stuff for that. So, I mean, there's some things just kind of sound a little crunchy, though. But I do like the music. I do. I think it's... I don't really know how to describe it. It's like minimalist in a way, but it's also kind of captures the emotion of what's going on in the scene.
I agree with Trevor. I think the main thing was the music did encapsulate the scene in of itself. It's just the background noise, the explosions, the bikes, the guns. It just being the 80s. It just didn't have what they have now. The sound wasn't great, so I can't really fault it because of its time, but it wasn't stupendous. So again, another fence line. Great music, sound effects lackluster.
I agree with both of you. The sound effects in this was rough. It was not the cleanest it could have been, but it was 1988, so I have to look at that with a little bit of grain of salt. Sound effects back then were really a challenge, and you could see it as like accidents happen and like explosions. It felt just off. But this music was good in this. Like I agree with you too. The music was what made the film decent.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with all those points, honestly. I have nothing even to add to that. I agree with you guys 100%.
Mm-hmm. I think we both pretty much, or I think we all three pretty much thought the same thing. Great music, sound effects, me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you guys said, I mean, it's kind of privileged for us to be like, oh, well, 30
Look what
years
we
in the
have.
future,
Yeah,
man.
look
Wow.
what we have now. So, bleh.
Cinematography and animation.
I gave it a 0.75.
I also gave it a 0.75.
I gave it a 0.75 as well.
Whoa.
Ew.
That's 2.
Yeah.
I really do like the animation. I think a lot of the scenes are wonderfully animated, though. One of my favorite things, too, and I think this will probably come up later when we talk about scenery, though, is a lot of the animation has a lot of small things, even in the background, too. So obviously you'll have the central, thing that they want you to focus on, though. But there's so much, like, animation going on in the background that every time I watch this movie, I pick up on something new, right? I think one of the new things I realized was when they were Kaneda and the rest of the biker gang were at the detention center, getting processed after they got arrested by the police after murdering people in a bike gang war.
Critically
When
harming, not killing.
yeah, yeah, lasting brain damage. I think one of my favorite scenes though is if I remember correctly, it's Kay. They kind of zoom in on her, but there's some people sitting right next to her. A lighter gets tossed in the air, and some people try and snatch it, and they try and light a broken cigarette as they're sitting there in like these really tight, cramped quarters. I never really noticed kind of the background characters when stuff like that was going on the first time I watched it. So I just feel like every time I watch it, there's just something new I can pick up on the background.
Absolutely. I think my main stigma was it is an 80s film and it is very choppy. But you have to take that into consideration, so you can't drop it too much for that. Therefore, it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't horrible. You got to take into consideration the time of the animation, how the fact that this was a 2-hour length film when, like Eli was saying, it wasn't very popular in Western culture. The main thing is the focus. If you focus too hard on what's going on the screen, you can see all the choppiness, all the kind of like flip book look. It's not terrible because it's of the time, but it was enough that it was distracting for me because I'm such an avid anime watcher. I can pick up on that real quick, real easy. But like you were saying, yeah, there was a bunch of crap going on in the background that you wouldn't even it would seem like it's actual extras working on a set of a live action film. There
Yeah.
was people hanging out in the background, like you're fighting over the lighter for the cigarette. There were children playing out on the streets in the background of a major scene. I mean, there was so much going on that even with the choppiness, my focus was still there. I could still see what was going on. My attention was still on the screen. It's just with my advanced anime brain here, I noticed the little blips in the transitions of scenes.
You're like on a whole new anime level compared to me.
Right?
If I could say one other scene I really enjoyed too. So this is also at the detention center when one of the resistance members, breaks out of the interrogation room and then, lights a grenade and he's like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna be a martyr and, off myself," right? And it fizzles out because it's a dud grenade, and then, he gets promptly beaten up by the police. But there's a scene where he's lying down and they drag him off screen, right? And there's like a smear of blood. Those scenes are so wonderfully detailed, and I think it's more because it's a static shot and there's only one thing moving, so they can they can be a lot more in depth on their on the drawing and how the scene actually looks. Those are the scenes I'm like, wow, that is amazing. Like, it's just there's only one or two things moving in the scene, but you could like look around and be like, wow, this really kind of encapsulates how dirty or broken or clean this kind of environment is, kind of depending on what scene it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The animation during the time was, like Ben said, flip book. It was a little rough. Don't get me wrong, but for 1988, this was a big project, and for what they did, props to them. I loved what you said, Trevor, about the still shots when they had only like one or two things moving. There was a scene at the end with that scientist. He's looking at something and there's like shading on his face. And you could just see the details behind him. You could see the details of his wrinkles. Like, it was just so good how the detail work was. But when they were moving around a lot, it looked rough.
Especially during fighting scenes.
Fighting scenes, it was rough. I give it the 0.75 because the detailing was so good in the still shots, but the animation was just rough. The shot selection in this film, I would say, was okay. It wasn't breathtaking. I really did like the close-up shots that they did on characters and like when they dragging that person in the detention center and showing the blood. It's like, yeah, it's a really cool shot. But the thing is that overall, the shot selection in this was kind of just subpar. It was adequately good back in 88, but in today's cinematography, it would not pass really at all.
Let's just say this film really didn't age well.
Yes, this film didn't age well, but it is a film that lays the foundation for a lot of anime movies that came out in the later years.
Well, if I could say one more scene that I absolutely loved. The first time Tetsuo was brought into the, MRI examination room and all that machinery kind of splits apart and starts spinning around and whatnot. Those scenes are amazing. I do love those a lot, though. Just the visual of all this machinery and, there's parts of Neo Tokyo that are really advanced, yet a lot of it's, even it's like 1940s or even like 1800s-esque, where people can barely even survive, yet they have these just absolutely fantastic, machines spinning around and, scanning and, they're doing brain scans. Yeah, I really like that a lot.
Again, another steel shot, straight focus to just this one thing instead of a bunch of things going on. That's what made it so spectacular.
I did like that this animation like laid the foundation for like the colors that they did in that scene that Trevor was talking about, the green and everything. Those types of shots with the coloring really laid the foundation for movies like Ghost in the Shell and other films. And I just really I thought it looked really good. Let's go to directing. I gave it a 0.75.
I ended up giving it a 1.
I also gave it a 1.
Why give it a 1?
At least for me, and I've kind of already explained this too, I just really love the whole theme of, somebody's feeling very powerless and they don't feel like they can change anything in their lives. And then all of a sudden they're given a massive amount of power and it goes straight to their head. And then you just watch them, this whole series of events start cascading as they go more and more off the deep end, hurting more and more people. I mean, honestly, even Tetsuo at one point literally collapses an entire bridge and kills probably hundreds or thousands of people. But, that's just stuff I like.
I would have to say the main focus of this was he knew what he wanted to deliver. The only problem with it was the side plots. But there was enough in cinematics and your sound and music that really connected you to certain scenes. Yes, the acting was not quite where I wanted it, but it was a young cast, and you have to take that into consideration and figure out how this certain person, this director, was going to get this cast to deliver a story. It wasn't that he didn't know what he wanted, it's just the cast was young. The main thing is this is a very complex story. It's very powerful. It like Trevor was saying, it shows a young boy who feels completely powerless, ends up with this power, and it goes completely to his head. The way that story was delivered, if you don't focus too much on all of the side plots that kind of hide this main plot, it's a very strong message. Anybody who gains power can fall. If you take the down and dirty of the story, it's a very powerful message, and it was delivered. It took a minute to get there, but it was delivered.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. It deserves a 1. I'm going to switch mine to a 1. The one thing that I want to bring up is that it's crazy. This director was the manga creator for this.
Mm-hmm.
So
original creator, character design, and script and director.
Yeah, he did all of it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did all of it. Because of that, he really had the whole movie in his hand. So I could see where some of the ups and downs came because he had a lot of decisions to make with his work. And it is a complex story. I feel like this could have been a short series, like 12 episodes, and he could have probably gotten it all. But because of the 80s, getting a TV series, getting anime series at all was almost impossible, it felt like back then. So he did what he could with the 2-hour time frame he had, and I do give him props for making this something that became a cult classic in the anime community. Because when you talk about this movie, you hear, like, when you talk about anime, people who started anime back then talk about this movie as like a foundation. So this director did a really good job of getting to where he needed his story to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with all those. But also, too, thank you for changing to one. Join us. Join us in the one club.
Hey, that's 3 that we match now.
Yep.
Yay! Let's talk about attraction. I gave it a 0.5.
I also gave it a 0.5.
I went for a 0.75. But I would like to hear your reasoning why it's 0.5. I'm going to, turn the question on you guys.
All right. Initially, when I was looking at this trailer, I liked the idea of Neo Tokyo and that. I'm just not a big 80s animation fan. Like, I never really liked North of the Star. I never really liked Appleseed 13. I never really liked the 80s style. So initially walking into this, I wasn't really that big of a fan of watching it. I'm more of that early 2000s type anime watcher or late 90s. So for me, the attraction was the fact that it was in the 80s. I couldn't get with it with the art style. I never liked the big mouth animation. Never really stuck with me. And yeah, that's why I gave it the 0.5.
Mine had to do with everything added up to this point. I haven't really gone much higher than a 0.5 on most of the things we've talked about. 2 of them are higher. The acting, I'm sorry, it wasn't great. There was too much going on with the plot. Your character development was very lackluster. There was not much there. I mean, all these things have to come together to really justify bringing attraction to a 1. You have to have a very strong foundation for someone to really be glued to this TV. While I was watching this, I was distracted. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm watching. Oh, my phone buzzed. Look at my phone. Oh yeah, I'm watching a movie. Watching. You can't have that. If you're looking away from your screen, waiting for the time to end, really just doing this for the podcast, I'm sorry, but your attraction's going to go down. I feel like I'm actually being generous with a 0.5. It wasn't one that I can see myself ever going back to.
See, I can definitely agree with your points. I really think the only reason then mine's probably a 0.75 is I love 80s and 90s animation. I know you kind of said you didn't, but I just love that style though. That's like one of my favorite. And 2, when I was watching it, at least the theme of, feeling powerless and then all this power going to your head, I really connected with that. It resonated with me a lot. So, okay, you know what? Fine. I'll drop it down to a 0.5 though, but for my own personal taste, I might still keep it a little higher. Like, how about this? I'll go like 0.55.
0.5.
More on your guys' level.
So, it's not that I love 90s anime. Like, I love Cowboy Bebop. I love Gundam. I love
My boy.
that stuff. But like the 80s, the best example I can give is North of the Fist of the North Star. It's a style that I could not get behind. And when in the 90s they were cleaning up their works, cleaning up their lines. The animation was looking more, having a better fluidity. And in the 80s it was just not there. And for me, I like my fluidity. And with the 80s, this film could not execute what I wanted. So that's why the attraction's still at a 0.5.
All right, fine. Okay, yeah, I'm cool with that.
Dialogue.
I gave it a 0.75.
I gave it a 0.25.
I gave it a 0.75. Ben, why did you give it a 0.25?
Because all the dialogue in this is to push the plot forward. I cannot name one line that popped out to me. Nothing that stuck with me. Nothing that was philosophical. Sorry. Nothing that was philosophical. Nothing that was even funny. There was just nothing. I had no emotional state watching this film, and the dialogue didn't help. Like, I just wanted it to end.
Trevor, why'd you give it a 0.75?
Honestly, I really like the dialogue because it has a lot of themes with, and I said this earlier, with Japan rising from World War II, with the nuclear bombs being dropped on them, and it feels like the U.S., obviously took occupation of Japan and helped restructure a lot of things. So it felt like there was a lot of themes between real life events and even events that happened in the show too. You know, when Tetsuo is getting examined by the big MRI machine and they're doing a brain scan, they notice that is having some developing psychic powers, and the colonel that's there talking to the scientist says, "Oh well, we're seeing some psychic abilities, but there's nothing too much to be worried about." And they kind of mention about how, oh well, we have to, stop if this gets out of hand. We have to kind of, kill him because we can't have anybody playing God again like we had with Akira. And I think there's a lot of parallels to that in like nuclear weapons, where it's kind of the hubris of man to believe that you can control such awesomely devastating, powerful weapons, even though it's usually just our own emotions that get the best of us, and it usually ends up with a lot of people dying because of it.
For me, there was a line. It was about it was from the colonel, and it was when he was about to leave, to go stop Tetsuo, and the council came up and tried to stop him. And after when he yelled shoot him, and then was like, enough, open your eyes and look at the big picture. You're all puppets to this corrupt politicians and capitalists. Don't you understand? It's utterly pointless to fight each other. So there was a common goal that all these guys were trying to do, but because of that special council, they were trying to stop what the colonel was trying to do, was trying to fix his problem. And I really found that line to be really, really big. It shows that the colonel was like, I'm trying to not have a war internally. We're all fighting the same battle. So I gave it a 0.75 because, and also I found this a little funny. The film was based in 2019, and then coincidentally, one of the guys in the chamber talked about doing the Olympics the next year in 2020,
And it didn't happen.
yeah, but Tokyo actually had the Olympics scheduled for 2020 in real life. So I thought that was like a little.
That's because the Olympics are scheduled 15 years in advance.
That was only
Salt Lake just announced the. I know that's quite a ways out, but
yeah.
I know Salt Lake just announced that the 2030 or 2034
bid is ours.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But no, it was just kind of clever. It was kind of like, oh wow, that good prediction, because in 88, 2020, that's a long distance.
Yeah.
Because the last Olympics they did was in 64. So I just thought it was very a coincidental thing. And I thought that was pretty funny. And I like the fact that the dialogue showed how advanced educated they were. I really did like how in the upper echelons, you felt it was a little more, you felt like the conversation was more there. But then in the rugged areas, in the slums and everything, you could feel that because of their situation, they really didn't know how to like have a intellectual conversation. It felt more barbaric and a little more like just, hey, stupid. So like, I really liked that. I really liked how it showed differences in the city on how you were raised, or what your status is depends on how you spoke.
They even show the education system for the poorer people in the slums, though. When Kaneda and Tetsuo are at the school, and Tetsuo, steals Kaneda's bike, they even go to the principal's office, and I think it's like the PE teacher just starts punching all the kids in the face and goes, "Discipline, bam! Discipline, bam! That's how we're gonna teach you kids to get in line, right?" So of course, these kids are gonna join biker gangs because they're like, school's a joke, right? I mean, even the principal doesn't even care that much. He's like, "Oh well, whatever. We'll just."
All right. I think Eli brought up a pretty good point with the military leader. I will go ahead and up mine to a 0.5, but there's just not really enough in it that tells me pop it to a 0.75.
And that's fair. All right. Scenery.
That did get a 0.75 from me.
Trevor?
I definitely got a 1 on that one.
I give it a 1 as well.
Yes.
What made you not want to give it a 1, Ben?
It was just too dark. I understand why they went with the dark themes. I did enjoy a lot of the outer world. I thought that the theme of the area, Neo Tokyo, was great. It had the rugged slums, the high ups in the more better looking areas. You were all over in the sewers throughout the whole, country. There was tons to look at. It was a lot to look at. It was very elaborate. It had a lot of dark tones that really pulled my attention away from the screen. I've said this many times. I'm not a big fan of the dark tones. I'm not. And the way they set up the dark tones for this certain film, some places just really didn't need it.
Yeah, and I'm just a big fan of, dark and gritty things like that. I really enjoyed the atmosphere that Akira kind of presents of this. Oh, it's Neo Tokyo. It's all fantastic and whimsical, and oh, look how advanced everything is. But in reality, though, it's literally this 1% of highly advanced technology built upon like the ruins and ashes of a devastated city that pretty much people live in just slums. I mean, when the two biker gangs are traveling down the highway into the old city, I mean, if you take an off-ramp, then there's people who just get killed. Like, as soon as that biker takes the off-ramp, his bike just explodes because, the whole city's just kind of we're building a new city on top of the ashes of an old one. And even too with the scenery, I mentioned this before, but I feel like every time I rewatch this show, there's just something new I can pick up in the background, which is why I love it.
For me, the 1 was for the detail. Like Travis said, you can find new things in the background. But I also did one of my favorite shots was the beginning shot where they pan up and you saw the whole old city and then it disappeared. And then throughout you see this new city that's just trying to rise from the ashes. And I really liked the styling of this. He took a lot of styling from his previous work the year before called Neo Tokyo, where he took a lot of the grittiness of it. And I really did like how Akira really showed what they believed was going to be 2019 in this film. Just the roughness, and it gave me that feeling of, it was a movie back in 81. It was something Manhattan. I cannot remember the name of the movie, but it gave a vibe of some of the early 80 films that came out, and he took a lot of inspiration from that, and I really did like it overall with the styling and the scenery. So that's why I gave it the 1. It really kind of engrossed me into seeing more of the scenery. But I do agree with you, Ben. The tones in this, some of it was a little too dark, but like it was far and few between, in my opinion.
Don't get me wrong. I love nitty gritty. I like dark, just not when it's not needed. And there were quite a few parts in this film where dark scenes just weren't really justified. It wasn't really needed.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Finally, recommend.
100% yes. I'm still going to 100% say yes.
Nope. 0.25.
I gave it a 0.5.
I had to go with a 0.25 because I know I'm never going back to this film. And watching it reminded me why I never went back to it. It's not one that I enjoy. My focus was not on the TV as much as I wanted it to be. And I couldn't, I was sitting there just, oh my God, is this done yet? Is it done yet? Can we just move on? Ugh, I still got another hour. Are you fucking kidding me? I feel like I've been sitting here for 5. I'm sorry. I can't even tell a seasoned anime watcher to, if you haven't already seen it, go watch this. It's just, it's not worth it. 2 hours, I'm not getting back.
I'm just still a massive fan of this movie. I would definitely, if not...
Yeah,
fine.
you're crazy.
Ben, I can agree with you on this, all right? Fine. You don't have to like it, though, but at least give it a shot. It is like one of the... it's one of like it's kind of the anime that started, this whole popular anime craze, right? It kind of kickstarted a lot of the stuff. So if anything, you kind of owe it a favor to at least watch it once.
I agree. I agree with both of you on this. Yes, Trevor, I agree with you. You got to give this film a shot because it does build a foundation for a lot of anime to come out in the future with some of the styling and some of the shots and just the world building that it did. But I will say, I'd only recommend this to people who really, really are more advanced in the anime community. I would never go to a first-time anime watcher and go, "Okay, you're gonna watch Akira with me, and we're gonna sit down and watch it." No, I couldn't do that. It had to be someone that has seen a few anime movies, has seen a couple series, and you would have to be interested in the Neo Tokyo, like gritty, like that type of apocalypse stuff. But I do say, going back to watching this, I remembered why it took me so long to get back to it. I'm not the biggest fan. I do like the overall foundation of this film. So yeah, I gave it a 0.5. I probably won't watch it for a long time, if ever, but I do recommend people giving it a chance if you are more a seasonal anime watcher.
Okay, so then my question for you, Eli, then, what would be an anime you would recommend for new time watchers?
An anime I'd recommend for new time watchers.
Yeah, never seen an anime before.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Ah, my boy, you talked many, many times about this.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is a great starting anime.
Mhm.
And I would always encourage that.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to throw the question to Ben.
What?
Trevor asked me a question. If you would not recommend this film, what would you recommend instead? Like for someone to watch? He
For a
asked me,
starter film?
or he just asked me for an anime besides this.
Well, what genre are we talking? One that matches or different?
Well, I guess Eli or Ben brings up a good point too. I mean, would you introduce somebody to a film first, or would you do like a series first for like somebody who's never seen anime before?
Oh, definitely always go with a film.
I never showed you a film when you started.
That's because I was already slightly introduced into anime.
Oh yeah, with Dragon Ball Z. Yeah. Yeah, if we had to
You never start with a series. That's 5 hours worth of their time.
Yeah. So if I had to pick a film to recommend, I'd there's a lot of anime films we've watched.
It has to be in their specific genre. So you'd have to ask them what do you watch? What do you like? So specifically, let's go with Trevor. Trevor, let's say you've never watched anime before.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you, what genre?
Let's say, since we're talking about Akira, okay, I want something nitty and gritty. I want something kind of dark.
Okay, nitty gritty dark. Well, if I had to choose a movie for a certain movie for ones that would work in that capacity, I would definitely go with.
So like nitty gritty, would you be okay with psychological?
Oh, sure. Well, you're just gonna like dump One Piece on me and be like, all right, have fun with that.
Fuck that.
Fuck that.
One Piece.
Fuck One Piece. We are on the same page. No One Piece. Too long, pointless, and waste of time. But honestly, if you're asking for a nitty gritty dark film that with a psychological, and if you're okay with it, I'd recommend Perfect Blue.
I was just about to say that. Nitty gritty psychological, I would go with Perfect Blue.
All right, give me a synopsis.
Perfect Blue is about this girl who's an idol, who was an idol group back in the early 90s, and she wants to change into acting. She wants to become an actress, and she wants to leave the idol life behind because she was super popular, but she wants to move into a new career. But the problem is that there's someone stalking her.
Ooh.
And
Okay.
because of that, she's dealing with all these like psychological problems of being tracked. And like we said in the episode when we reviewed it, it's a psychological mind fuck.
So is it a series or a movie?
It's a movie.
Okay,
It's
it's a
a-
movie. All right.
It's a movie. It's a 2-hour film. By far, it will keep you on the edge of your seat. I would say that. It has dark themes of stalking and the actress life in Tokyo, where you have to do things that you don't want to do. Like,
Also, it's got some parallels to even real life as well, like kind of the acting scene in
Yeah,
Tokyo
absolutely.
and in Japan itself. Okay.
Absolutely.
Does it kind of go along with like that idol kind of thing they have in Japan?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Another film I'd recommend would be Tokyo Godfather. That deals with themes of how rough the homeless community is in Japan. Also, the story is about three homeless people trying to get a baby back to their original family, and it just
Okay.
shows the grittiness of what it's like to live on the streets, deal with the homelessness community, and see what the world is outside of the big lights of Tokyo and the main streets.
Yeah, it like kind of goes over like the underbelly of Japan.
Yes, and it actually shows themes of a character in it that is transgender. So
Really?
it was a film that it's from the same creator of Perfect Blue. So like
Oh, okay.
it's the themes that they went on some extreme themes that really outshine it through their art, and it was so good.
So does this director like kind of pick darker sides of kind of Japan's culture and then kind of focus in on that with like movies and whatnot?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are way off topic.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. So the capsulate everything back. I actually upped my score in this to a 7.
Mine ended at a 5.5, so it went up 0.5.
And I landed down at a 6.75 because I wanted to drop it a little bit.
Wow. In the end, I flipped.
Yeah.
You win.
Hey, Ween.
Honestly, like if I was gonna give kind of my synopsis of at least about my score though, I love the animation. I do, especially in those still shots, wonderfully drawn, and it's super detailed and in depth though. But at times, especially when a lot of things are moving on, it's kind of crusty. I mean, it's 80s anime, so whatever. I do like the dialogue, but at some points it's like, okay, not a big fan of that. Or it just kind of gets a little dry sometimes. But I really love the themes. I think that's probably my favorite thing about this whole show, and that's why I would recommend it to people. Is for me, kind of themes and the overarching, like, oh, this has parallels to nuclear bombs being used on Japan and the old culture dying, and then this new one being risen up from the ashes of that. Yeah, I just love those kind of themes, and that's what really seals the deal for this movie for me.
So as we wrap up, Trevor, I love you on the show. We appreciate you so much for coming on this week. Truly, this was a fun time, and I would love to have you back on.
Okay, yeah.
So as we wrap up this week's episode of Nerd Taku Podcast, I'd like to talk about next week's episode. It is the 2019 comedy drama, The Peanut Butter Falcon. Such a good, wholesome story. It just seems so good. And this film looks like Shia LaBeouf really put his soul into this. And I'm super excited. I'm going to give it a 7. And I'm actually hoping it proves me wrong.
I feel like this was just an absolutely wholesome, beautiful, funny trailer. It showed parts of desperation, parts of love, parts of fun, anger. I think it's gonna do well. I'm going to put it at an 8, and I'm hoping that it sticks to it or does better. It just feels like it's gonna be a great one.
So as we wrap up this week's episode of Nerd Talker Podcast, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into this week. If you want to follow us, we're on Instagram and Threads at nerd_taku_podcast. We're also on YouTube under Kingdom Notes Studios. As always, guys, I'm Eli.
I'm Ben.
Thanks again, guys, for tuning into this week, and take care.
Have a great one.